Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom.
So, if you'll join me in a countdown in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and help me give an Economics Club welcome to Wednesday.
Thank you, David, and thanks to all of you for the invitation to present to you today and to tell you a little bit about Space Florida. Space Florida does not do a lot of self-promotion, so I really enjoy getting out to speak to groups like this throughout the state, because we worked very hard over the last 5-6 years, in fact since the founding of Space Florida, to understand the strength of the statute that we were given and to make the tools that we have a key part of the governor's economic development toolkit, working with Jesse Panuccio at DEO and Bill Johnson at Enterprise Florida. We think we've worked out a real strength to bring to the table the things that make Florida attractive to next generation aerospace businesses. In many respects, I may have one of the best jobs in the state because it's an exciting area, and Space Florida is in itself a very unusual organization. We were created as a legislatively chartered public corporation that is not a non-for-profit. We're a for-profit public corporation, but we were also given independent special district status. And that gives us the ability to work government to government at one level, and then to turn around and work with a company, company to company at another level, and to cut deals that make sense to make ourselves attractive to bring those companies to Florida. The area that we focus on is the space industry and the larger aerospace industry, and our statute covers both space and aerospace. And these are very integrated. Space, aviation, and aerospace are very integrated, and they're highly interdependent, but they also are horizontal industries in that they have a little bit of IT, a little bit of electronics, a little bit of structures, advanced materials. And so that gives us license to reach pretty far to support a lot of the innovation generators that Florida wants to attract for its economic well-being. The aerospace industry is a vital part of the state's economic well-being. Clearly, it is, I think, depending on who you look at, Deloitte shows it at $600 billion worldwide, and that's aerospace and defense, 400 of which is in the U.S. The AIA, which has a more narrow definition, shows it at 280, and that's just in the U.S., but it is difficult to get any one group to compare these industries because they are so broad-based, so that you do apples-to-apples comparisons. But this industry has always had a very positive balance of trade impact on the country. This past year, there was a $61 billion plus in the balance of trade coming from aviation and aerospace. So it is a vital part of not only the U.S. economy, but every state as well. Let me start with a quick overview of Space Florida and what we focus on. In the statute, we were set up to serve as the state spaceport authority, which is a statewide role for spaceport territory anywhere in the state. We are not exclusively focused on Cape Canaveral, the Cape Canaveral Spaceport, or Brevard County. Secondly, because of the tools that we have as an independent special district, we were given the ability to apply those tools across the board to a variety of aerospace applications, and we are working hard with the governor's office and the legislature to make Florida attractive. The aerospace industry is going through a transition, as is the space industry itself. And we're moving from an era in space where for the past 50 years it was largely dominated by federal government and federal governments around the globe. Today, that is rapidly changing, brought on by increased government reliance on the private sector due to tight federal budgets everywhere, to sequestration, and to things like that. Industry also is going through consolidations globally. As they look to next gen, they realize that they need to get away from the high-cost environments that they may be operating in, like in California or in some of the Rust Belt areas, which makes Florida very attractive because the governor and the economic development team and the legislature work very hard to drive regulatory processes down, to eliminate regulations that are unnecessary and at cost, to create a favorable tax environment. And so Florida becomes more and more attractive, especially when you look at the quality of labor force that we have throughout the state. Our role is to be sure that the state has and the industry have the infrastructure that they need to come to Florida and to thrive, especially as they look at their next generation systems. And for next generation, they want to get away from the aged manufacturing plants that they have into new facilities, whether advanced manufacturing facilities that they have on a next generation product. So our role as an infrastructure enabler is critical to the economic future of the aerospace industry in the state. To put it simply, 50 years ago, in 2004, the legislature put a symbol of a shuttle on the Florida quarter to commemorate the last 50 years of the state's contribution to space exploration. Our future that space stays an integral and leading edge part of the state's future well into the next century. Why is this important? Well, many other nations have recognized the importance of space, especially as it becomes more and more commercial. Today, there are some 39 spaceports globally that are either existing or planned. In the US alone, there are 19 existing or planned. Other nations covet what we in the US have had, and other states covet what we in Florida had. A celebrated 50 years of heritage, and we're all very proud of that. There is no guarantee that the future is ours unless we really compete for it. But that's what we are trying to position the state to do. Today, the industry that we're going after is a $334 billion industry. What's significant about that, that's a global number, is that 76% of those revenues come from commercial markets. Things into space and commercial companies figuring out how to use what was up there, the satellite industry, to drive a number of value-added businesses. And that is really the significant, that's where many of the innovations are occurring, and those innovations spread to other sectors of our economy. That's what other states and other countries want. We have a lot to work with, though, to offer the state on a larger aerospace scale. And sometimes it's hard to separate a product, a company that produces aerospace product, many of which can be used for the space industry itself. In Florida alone, we count some 20,000 aerospace companies employing about 140,000 people and contributing just under $20 billion to the state's economic well-being annually. They're clustered in multiple parts of the state. What's important about this, though, is that I gave you the primary aerospace companies, the ones that are easily identifiable. There are a significant multiple of the number that are in as part of the supply chain. Companies that may only do 20 or 30% of their volume with aerospace, and they don't necessarily classify themselves as aerospace. But that is where much of the economic growth is coming from, so we concentrate very heavily on building the supply chain. When we faced the retirement of the shuttle, many people believed that the space program in the US was dead or stopped. There's nothing that is farther from the truth. Today, the Cape Canaveral Spaceport is the busiest spaceport in the world, and we're launching at a rate of 2 a month. Space Florida owns or has enabled almost all of the infrastructure that is above the ground to support those 2 a month launches, whether they're on Air Force property or NASA property. we have played a very enabling role. To face the retirement of the shuttle, we concentrated on attracting next generation companies with a focus on diversification as well as on growth of the supply chain. They were our two cornerstone strategies. We do care about the vertical rocket, and we care about the stuff that's up at the pointy end of the rocket as well, and all the enabling hardware that makes all that stuff work. But the real carrot for the state are in the myriad of companies that take space assets and develop value-added businesses here on the ground to make use of the information and use of the communications. And that's true in agriculture, in communications, in cybersecurity, in use of the space station for microgravity work, in clean energy, and a variety of other areas where the technologies that are space-related drive innovation in other sectors. Our overall goal was to position Florida to attract every major next-generation space system that's out there. And we are in dialogue with many of them, but that's clearly where we're headed with every one of these. I'll give you some examples of these as we get going. We have a spaceport plan, which is part of our charter, to work with the Department of Transportation to develop a statewide spaceport system plan and vision. And then we update that every 3 years to ensure that we are putting the right infrastructure in place to support the growth of the industry, again, not just at Cape Canaveral Spaceport, but statewide. Today, there are 2 active Air Force pads and 2 active NASA pads. I know when you look at the picture of the Cape, it looks like there's a whole lot of stuff there, but this is what's operating today. Space Florida also has 2 launch complexes and is working to develop one outside the fence of the federal government that is purely on commercial property in an area called Shiloh. We're also looking to attract launch companies that are able to launch very small payloads. And I'll show you some examples of these small sats or CubeSats in a few moments. About 2 weeks ago, the governor announced when he was in Paris that the Space Florida board had just approved taking the storied landing facility that supported the shuttle and transferring that facility from NASA to the state, to Space Florida. This is a facility that was taxpayer paid, that has a long useful life. We intend to commercialize it and develop it as a special purpose spaceport to attract a whole host of next generation companies that plan to operate with horizontal takeoff platforms that will go up to a certain altitude and then launch a smaller rocket to take satellites into space and eventually people into them. This is a significant initiative for the state. The state of New Mexico, as an example, spent $200 million to develop a capability that doesn't begin to touch what this one is already and will be in the future. We're also working with Cecil Field and the Titusville area who have applied for spaceport licenses. Our role is to ensure that there's a consistency of policy in the application of state or federal funds, as well as to ensure that there is a consistent approach to safety and operations to ensure that indemnification regimes apply in a uniform way around the state. We are also working to position Florida for next generation advanced manufacturing capabilities in aerospace. And I'll give you some examples of that. Today we are, for the first time, developing spacecraft and rockets, and we'll be developing rockets in Florida, which is something that we haven't done before. What is significant is that as the marketplace has discovered what we can do with financing, and most of the work that we do in investment is using third-party capital in a way that is secure and based on very solid deals. We've been able to attract a fairly large following of trading partners in the financial institutions, as well as in the reinsurance companies and pension funds. And this is something that's important to our future. This is an example of a project. The picture in the upper left is the orbital processing facility number 3. And all of that that Tinker Toy apparatus that you see is the apparatus that used to close around the shuttle after it landed, and hundreds of workers would climb all over it to get it ready for reflight. We took that facility from NASA and cleaned it out, so there's the before and after at the bottom of that page. And we have just turned that facility over to Boeing to do the final assembly and manufacturing of its CST-100 spacecraft. So it's the first time that spacecraft are being assembled and manufactured here in Florida. And they'll be flying those for both commercial cargo as well as commercial crew. This is a project where we took orbital processing facilities number 1 and 2 and made some investment in those facilities to attract a classified Air Force program that is flying out of Florida. Their alternative was to fly out of California, so the investment that we made clearly was an enabler in bringing them to Florida for their future operations. Several years ago, when NASA was competing for commercial cargo to the space station, Orbital Sciences Corporation chose to go to Wallops. We're working very hard to bring them back, and in fact, this is an example of a project that we're activating Launch Complex 46, which is a state-owned launch complex, to support the Orion program and an set abort test, and hope to have future work with other launch companies that will launch out of 46. We're not restricted to just space stuff, and that's a point that I want to make. Clearly, this was a private company, Embraer Aircraft. Space Florida worked with Embraer to secure a next-generation engineering and technology center for them to design next-generation business jets. And this is the first engineering and technology design center that they've ever placed outside of the country of Brazil. And Space Florida will finance, has financed, and built, and will own and operate this over a long period of time to provide that for Embraer. We're working very hard to attract the small satellite industry as well. Shown are 2 pictures of CubeSats that are 10 centimeters on a side. And you can take them, you can stack them in 3 or build cubes out of them, and they can fly in formation when they get into space or operate as a smaller unit. But this is a standard that is helping to dramatically change the way things are done in space. Smaller, as we learn to do much more with smaller and smaller electronics, this is changing the economics of satellites and space as well. Florida has a real opportunity here to tie together the modeling and simulation community in the center of the state with the digital design and domain community that is also located throughout the state with a variety of other assets that are in our aerospace clusters in different parts of the state. And I think we're well positioned to participate in this next generation industry. Space Florida is chartered clearly to work with the federal agencies that are all involved in space and aerospace. But we're also putting varying collaboration agreements in place with other countries, including the UK, Brazil, Israel, Spain, Japan, and we're working on Germany. And that's to enable and to share best practices, drive down the costs of space operations, and to take advantage of the collaboration impact that can come from other countries that are also have achieved a level of technology leveling in many areas. So what's the future? The future of Florida clearly is that the skies of Florida are going to be different than we remember. They are going to be full of next generation platforms, and we're working very hard to make sure that those next generation platforms are operating out of Florida and that they're thriving in Florida. Why do we want to do that? And I'll simply say that space and aerospace drive technologies in a whole variety of areas. This is not a chart that's meant to be read as much as depict that space and aerospace really do touch a lot. And we want the innovation that comes when we push the edges in space and aerospace. Space in particular is hard. We deal with very complex vehicles in a harsh environment and to make things work and to keep humans alive when we explore space, we have to develop a whole variety of technologies, from closed-loop environmental support systems to advanced materials to advanced propulsion, and all of these things better our lives here on Earth. I can only say that I think Florida is very, very well positioned to attract next-generation space companies to the state. We're working hard to do that. Not just domestic companies, but European companies as well, who want to take advantage of the quality of life, the favorable tax structure, the business-friendly environment, and all of the other attributes that we offer. With that, I'm going to close, and hopefully we can engage in some Q&A.
Thank you, Frank. It's my pleasure on behalf of the club to, as a token of our appreciation for your being with us today, to present you with this, this bronze eagle that is sculpted by nationally acclaimed but Tallahassee resident Stanley Proctor. We want to thank you, and we're glad that you could be with us.
Very glad. Thank you very much.
I want to remind you again of our program on August 19th, and with that we stand adjourned. Thank you all.